We have to reach the truck drivers where they are. And where are they? They're in a truck stop, they're on their device, they're in their driver's seat. So the guys we're after are at work. We need to reach them at work.
It's Solving Your Driver Problem, where we bring guests who have real tactics and strategies for driver recruiting, compliance, training, and retention. Today we have Jason Crowell. He is the recruiting and retention manager for Brady Trucking. He describes himself as a talent pipeline builder and career matchmaker. I would contend he's much more than that. As a one-man band, he's doing more with his team than I see with teams 4 or 5 times the size of him and what he's up to. And many would say what he recruits and retains is an impossible job in trucking, but he proves every day that's not the case. And Jason's experience is 27 years. I don't know if you care to admit that, Jason, of recruiting blue-collar workers, both in trucking and manufacturing. And part of the reason we're bringing him on is how he's evolved creatively with the times. In fact, he's released a 3-part blog series on the recruiting evolution. And that's what we're going to dive into today. So, Jason, welcome and thanks for the time.
Thanks so much for having me, Scott. I love to connect and talk about these, as we say, the recruiting and retention nerdy topics that I love so much. So I'm happy to be on, and I love Avatar and what you guys do as well. I love your content and your service. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely, that's right. Well, this is so that's the disclaimer that we're about to nerd out deep into recruiting and retention of truck drivers. So if anyone's a little queasy at that, now's a fair time to leave. So why don't we start with your background, but I want to bring, not just the biography here. I want to talk about what's framed your foundation. So you clearly have evolved over 27 years with the times. If not, you wouldn't be as successful as you are. So I really respect how you look outside the trucking industry to bring in new ideas for recruiting and retention. So what experiences or lessons that you've learned over the years have laid that foundation for how you're approaching recruiting and retention at Brady?
Well, I would trace it back to 1990, New York City. I ran a Domino's Pizza. I managed a Domino's Pizza, and it was kind of like a United Nations of immigrants coming and going, and high volume recruitment for these immigrants going in and out in the East Village in New York City. They delivered on bikes, and I was responsible for the onboarding and the enculturating, retention and training of these guys. And that's really what got me going, with people being the business, not pizza and Coke as they sort of sold it back then. It was a people business. And I brought that with me. The years in New York have served me well because every business is a people business. Mm-hmm. When you connect humans with a purpose, then you get an engaged workforce. And I think, when you have an engaged and well-directed workforce, it's a recipe for success.
I love the purpose. If you're, for those of us who have heard us, we usually bring a Simon Sinek component to everything we do, where you start with the why versus the what, and the why is the purpose. And I think that's we can get into this now if you want. If not, we'll get into it later when we talk about some of how you convey your message. But when we talk about Brady Trucking, how do you convey the purpose for a driver who's out in the oil fields?
Sure. Well, a lot of what we do is, rather than talking about the company, we've kind of switched it over to talking about the driver and taking it a step further, allowing the driver to talk for themselves. Mm-hmm. And we do it through those quick hit videos that you've seen. They're not about Brady Trucking, really. They're about my experience. They're about the driver and what they do. Sometimes it's about their family or about what they do outside of work or how they got here or how hard the work is. But having a driver convey the message is the most authentic way that we've found. And it really has served us well because it gets action. We make a quick emotional connection, and that causes someone who's looking at it to act in 30 or 60 seconds. We never make those long videos that are corporate and, someone watching it for 3 or 4 minutes. That's untenable really at a truck stop, a guy on his phone scrolling his nephew's pictures from a soccer game. He's going to look for 30 seconds and decide to act or not to act. And so that's what we've done, is have the driver be the speaker and the driver talk about themselves, not the company.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love it. The cool kids, right? If we're nerding out, the cool kids calling that user-generated content these days. But that's it, because it's
Exactly.
believable, right? No one cares what you and I have to say. They care about what the current drivers say, because when we say something as marketers, they're going to go fact check that. They're going to go corroborate that with online reviews, right?
Right. And there are different steps in the journey. Early in the journey, they're not, a candidate or a driver at a truck stop is not invested in this company,
Right.
but they can be invested in a guy doing the truck driver job for a second and click more information. They don't care about my great equipment, my great benefits. Every trucking company says all those things.
Right.
They care about, oh, that guy looks like me. Let's see what this is and take a step.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So we're very quickly want to jump in and start nerding out. I could see a couple ways this goes. I want to take a quick step back just to set the stage here. So because sometimes when we're talking, it's kind of highfalutin, this marketing concepts, and it only works for certain people, or hey, anyone can recruit that job. If you don't mind, just set the table for people. Let people know, what the job is out in for Brady. I mean, your drivers are on the oil fields. They're home. Home. They're out for weeks at a time. Home never. For lack of a better term. So tell us about that approach of that balance. So you balance. You don't sugarcoat anything, and I think most people know that, but we know that happens on the industry. You do a nice job of balancing wooing, showing them what it's real it's going to be like, and so kind of talk us through that balance of how you make that approach.
Sure, it doesn't woo everybody. It only woos a few, and that's kind of the goal. Authenticity is like the true north for our people operations process. Years ago, we used to sell the job to someone, but when you're selling a job, it may not be right for the receiver. Our approach now is more like an opt-in. The receiver decides if they want to step toward our offering or away from our offering. And when our marketing, either in advertising or in just touch points that candidates find online, is differentiated with value, then they decide. They either click the button and opt in, or they step away and say, whoa, that job is not for me. And either way is the right answer, because we show the mud and ice, the away from home and family for weeks at a time. That the realistic job preview is what we call it, RJP. And when a person sees that, they know if that's them or not. And that helps us. So it woos some, but it doesn't woo everybody. No company needs to recruit everybody. There's such a variety of business and such a variety of drivers. There's drivers for each of us. We need to recruit the right ones, not millions of the wrong ones.
100% agree. I love that you brought up the RJP, the realistic job preview. It's something that only a handful of our clients have really adopted and got excited about, and I've always scratched my head at it. And my experience was we had such a wide funnel from my experience recruiting drivers. So when I had your job back in the day, it was we needed 800 leads to hit our goal of 20 hires. Think about how wide of a funnel that is. And if we had that's inefficient. That's not a good use of recruiters' time. And to your point,
Amen, brother.
a yes or a no is a great answer, because we don't need to spend time with the people that are going to say no down the road. So I love that tip of the realistic job preview. Go ahead. Yeah.
The cool part today is that their yes doesn't have to be apply now like it was 10 years ago. The yes is more information, and all they have to do is step toward us and we give them the next bit of information. They don't have to go straight to an application. That's a poor way to manage candidates.
Absolutely. So, we've borrowed the term the buyer's journey and changed it into the driver's journey, where you map out each step of the process, and kind of it's a bunch of if-then statements. If they say yes, then go here. If no, see you later. If they say yes, application. If no, this another video. Same kind all the way down. Have you gone through a similar exercise and laying out your content strategy?
Oh, sure. Consistently. We do that, and we update, and any piece of content that we're going to put out, it has to fit somewhere into that funnel. And sometimes the funnel isn't a direct line to getting hired. Sometimes it's just good information to have. It's general stuff that a truck driver that would like this job would be entertained by or would be informed by, and then they stay in touch with us. They don't have to necessarily get hired next month just because they're consuming our content.
Yeah, I do. I really want to jump into your approach on the new recruiting funnel, but my last high level question for you that I think is important to set the stage is your title. You're a recruiting and retention manager. I'm seeing that recruiting and retention is becoming more common as one person having that, but it's not the norm. Um, how does having both responsibilities change your approach, Jason?
Well, I'm not sure that it hasn't changed my approach recently. I've been blessed to be a corporate recruiter since like 1997 or something. I was a third party recruiter before that. So at that point, I didn't necessarily care about retention. But as soon as I joined an organization and started working with hiring managers, the hiring managers that I had to work with post hire, and sometimes even years into after the hire, I had to have a different perspective on business KPIs, because when I brought a person in, I would see what type worked, what type really bombed out, what type annoys us, or what type says all the right answers in the recruiting process, but still I know they're not going to work. I'm on the company's team. And so I've got to have people join the company, or at least get set up to join the company, who would make both them and us successful. I'm kind of like a gatekeeper. So I see it as very important, and I have long term. I don't know if there's ever been a retention title like in manufacturing way back when I was there, but that's what we did. I went out on the assembly lines and talked to the folks, and we retained people.
No, I'm with you, and I would say that our account manager. I'll do a little bragging. One of our account managers, Karen Murphy, we used to work together on in the recruiting department, and I think like you, she was graded on and bonused on how many drivers did she bring in each month, but because she cared, she thought about the retention, and I always thought, we she's doing it because it's the right thing, but it all the incentives of the organization suggest you can ignore that responsibility. The reason why you wouldn't is you don't want to let down your operations team. When I say incentives, I'm talking about financial incentives. And so I'm not asking you to lift up your hood a little bit here, but just kind of more of a broad statement that when we make recommendations to clients, whether it's operations, whether it's recruiting, to always make sure that your financial incentives align with what you ask of someone. So making sure that retention incentives are in play. And that's something that's usually not done. So that was kind of my point. I think good people with the right intentions, recruiters with the right intentions, think that way. And my encouragement is, if you're going to bonus them on the number of people they bring in, have longevity to that. And add that to it. I just think it changes someone's approach, and you can't have the financials not align, because people always are going to, what would you do? Right. This is what we've assigned the company. So I don't know if you've got anything more to add to that.
Well, I do listen to Dave Ramsey. Our company affords us the opportunity to be a member of Dave Ramsey's, and I get his financial advice, and he recommends financial advisors who are salary-based, not commission-based. And it has a different focus when you're salary-based and not commission-based. I'm not out to get 10 hires for Monday just because I get that bonus the following week. I'm out to have a successful team because I'm still going to be here at the end of the year, and the managers are going to be looking at me across the table saying, how'd we do?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't like the idea of being bonused on hires. I do like the idea of being bonused on retention, but our company hasn't gotten there yet. So I'm interested in that topic, and I've talked it over with our CEO in my original interview here, but we never got to that point where I would be bonused for retention, because there's so many other operational and logistical and maintenance components to retention. It's tough to recognize a recruiter for that retention.
No, understood. And it's a team game, right? I actually saw you chatting about that on LinkedIn today as one of our posts. So that because it is a team game, and I think that's part of the reason why people avoid that. Whether maybe it's a team pool, would probably be the fairest way. Because to your point, there's the can do, will do. It's what does someone bring them in the door on just who they will be. You can't change who he is at a certain age. And then there's certain components that you can change, and there's certain components that you can control as a company. So we'll put a little bookmark on that. We'll solve that problem on another day. I want to get back to actually you touched on this earlier, and it's actually the email exchange between us that is the reason why we're here, which is the passive versus the active candidate. So just to catch everyone up, I sent Jason a message asking him about a hypothesis that the passive candidate, and we'll just define that real quick. The passive candidate is someone who wasn't looking for a job, right? They were on Facebook, they were scrolling through and saw the Brady Trucking ad once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. They signed up for something, they get a little ping, they get the drip, and then a month later they go, you know what? I need to talk to this Jason person. This looks intriguing. I am a target fit. That's the passive candidate versus the active job seeker. That's the person who hit go on fatj.com and sent off a resume to 50 people, of which he doesn't even know who he applied for, at the time of it. And I said, is there a higher retention for the passive versus the active? And Jason stated, we only hire passive candidates. That's the only way to go. And we made that decision 5 years ago. That's how we would get going. So would you mind, Jason, just kind of describing how you made my hypothesis irrelevant, and more so, why did you make that decision 5 years ago?
Sure. We're at full employment. Truckers have jobs. The ones that are looking at Craigslist, and they're out of work and looking at that's not your target audience. You named a vendor. I'm not going to name any vendors, but there's a whole bunch of those niche job boards where I think they've become obsolete. If a guy's out of work for a period of time and looking for work as a truck driver, that's a red flag in my eyes, because there's a trucker job across the street. There's one down the road. There's one in the next town. Trucker jobs are everywhere. Truckers are working. So I'd like to back up a second here to about 2008 or so. Indeed changed the way that the world looks for work, really. You don't have to go to these niche job boards anymore. You go to Google, you type in truck driver in your location, and hundreds or thousands of jobs are at your fingertips right there. So that's 2008. Fast forward that to today, and the truck driver supply and demand issue has become more grave year over year. The older ones are retiring. The federal regulations are tighter. The younger generation is not going into it. So in this extreme driver market, posting a job and hoping someone sees it that's the post and pray, we used to call that. And I did that 25 years ago. Today, that's not working. We have to reach the truck drivers where they are. And where are they? They're in a truck stop. They're on their device. They're in their driver's seat. So the guys we're after are at work. We need to reach them at work.
We want to thank you for taking time to listen to Solving Your Driver Problem. If you like the ideas you're hearing and want more information, please subscribe to our blog. You'll receive a weekly email newsletter where, just like this podcast, we're sharing the best ideas and tactics in the industry for improving driver recruiting, compliance, training, and retention. Go to AvatarFleet.com/blog to subscribe. While you're there, check out how our software and services are helping our clients hire more drivers while cutting their ad spend in half, achieve driver qualification file compliance in half the time, and reducing claims by 30%. That's AvatarFleet.com/blog or AvatarFleet.com to check out our products and services.
So the passive candidate, Jason, and the new recruiting funnel. So when you make that declaration that let's find them while they're at work and we're not interested in finding the person who's searching for a job. Totally agree with you 100%. I love that you made my hypothesis relevant. We don't even need to research why. This is why. So you, in one of your posts, you talked about, and I liked how you brought in it was more B2B sales of, hey, marketing is now king. Look how far marketing and the drip campaign, you mentioned opt-in, right? That's been permission-based marketing, Seth Godin, a la 2007, 2008, right? Same stuff. You mentioned more of like a recruiting cloud, right? So the driver is in, part of my pun, is in the driver's seat. They're picking and choosing the content they want to consume about you when they want to. So just tell us about that, how you've evolved, particularly in the last 5 years, shifting from the traditional funnel to this concept of the cloud.
Sure. I think it's been a little longer than 5 years, more like around 10 years ago. Google came up with this concept of, instead of the traditional model of marketing, stimulus and response, like we've always had, they have this middle concept called the zero moment of truth, where between the stimulus, when a guy hears about your company and he acts about your company, in between there is some research. And that's where we live right now. That's where marketing lives, is between stimulus and response, where we can impact through learning. We can give him video, we can give him website, we can give him social, we can provide testimonial. And then our drivers are also contributing to this because they're all online 24/7 like the rest of the population. So as a driver's doing his due diligence between stimulus and between response, before he acts on anything, we've placed points of contact all along there where they'll be on message. They'll be able to get a target message that's for them. And then it's not always the same content necessarily. Sometimes it's general content. Sometimes it's very specific and news related content, but it's all on target and getting them to say, oh, I like this place, or I don't like this place. I'm stepping forward toward the offer. I'm stepping back from the offer. That's generally what that zero moment of truth is about. And the point is that it's all exists 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because drivers are out there looking at their phones whenever. It doesn't have to be that they call their company or any of that kind of stuff anymore. It's really about having all the information at their fingertips when they're ready to look, when they're ready to respond.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a more of a kind of a cowboy assessment on my take, but roughly speaking, like 80% of the research is done before they pick up the phone to say hello to you, right? And you compared it in one of your recent posts about, hey, before you buy shoes or golf clubs or a new car, what did you do? You went online and you looked at a bunch of sources. So if it was a car, you were looking at Edmunds, right, an independent third party. You called your friends and you asked about it. And so before we walked, and my wife and I did this just a couple months ago, before we walked into the dealership, our mind was pretty much made up. It really was which color we were going to go with, and we didn't really care. It was what was available on the lot. And I think that analogy is how a trucker is making a decision on the job. Sure, they've got some clarifying questions. And I think that is your job, is they answer the questions, but ask the right ones to allow them to see the contrast to what they have today and what it could be. And you're figuring out that career matchmaker that is an accurate description. Is this a good fit? Because to your point, we don't watch you if it's a bad fit, because it's not going to be good for anyone. You're not going to be happy. We're not going to be happy. So the power of
we've
video.
Seen this.
Oh.
I'm sorry, we've seen this coming for quite some time with review sites and online research and all that kind of stuff. But it came to light really for me when the grandkids are watching YouTube videos about unboxing toys and playing with toys. That's when it really hit me that, wow, this whole generation, this whole world is looking at stuff before they do stuff. They're researching before they act. And that's what hit me hard.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I want to dive into two things. So it's you mentioned it's the reviews, your online reputation, and then what you can kind of control about it with the videos. So let's start with the power of video. And a great line that you had was, make them feel something and they'll do something. And video is the most effective tool to do that. We believe so heavily in the old brain. That's who we market to. The old brain can't read or write. It can only consume, sight's the only sense that hits it directly. So we want to communicate with video. That's why. And that's the feeling that you get. We say it's a gut feeling. It's actually our old brain feeling. When you make or creating those videos, you do a really good job of pulling stories from drivers and capturing them. You're a movie director there. How do you effectively set up those drivers to pull those stories? Because they're really powerful.
Yeah, so you've mentioned that I'm a one-man show here, but I've got a partner in crime for video that I have to mention here, James Tex Crowley. He's at the the Texas Media Foundry down in Texas, and he helps me with those type of things. He really has been creative and been camera and been director basically for me in those things. Obviously, I do the messaging, but he really is my partner in crime. So I got to give him the shout out. Our major change that we made a few years back is that we stopped talking about the company and we start letting the driver talk for himself. And he didn't talk about the company when the driver was talking. He talked about himself. And so we ask questions about self. And Tex and I do this together, and he asks long form questions, and we get an awful lot of information about the driver, his family, oftentimes what he likes to do, his hobbies, the goods and bads about the jobs and all that kind of stuff. And we slice and dice it up in the editing room to be these quick hit. I believe we have like 50 pieces of unique content now that go out there with emotional impact, so that a driver says more information or no, not me with it. So really it's about the driver saying it instead of the company talking about themselves. That's the difference that video has made for us. We have really good quality video. They're sort of homemade type videos. They're not overly produced like a corporate video, but they're real good quality.
Yeah, and I would contend, Jason, that would makes it more authentic. I would view that as a feature, not a bug, as we say in the software world. So,
Yes,
when you got this army of content, and so is that how you kind of, when you talk about a career matchmaker, are you looking at your library based on your conversations and picking out, you know what, I think Bob Jones really needs to hear this piece, and sliding it in a email or text? How do you go about managing that?
exactly what we do. So we have this library of content, and then we have what we call the 8 Mile. Chad Hendricks from Brand Outcomes taught me about the 8 Mile, where you say all your stuff up front, your goods, bads, and uglies, and then the candidate is able to make a judgment from that. 8 Mile's a reference to the Eminem movie. If you haven't seen it, the end rap battle, you got to go check that out. In any case, we put out the 8 Mile, and our different 8 Miles have different videos and different testimonials in them that talk about maybe if the job's up in the mountains or in the snow. It talks about chaining up in mud and ice, and the content is varied depending on where the job's going to end up. So certainly we do customize those intro letters in that 8 Mile introduction to the end use, to the end job.
No, I like it. Chad's also a guest. He's been a guest here, and has some great ideas. And I love how he approaches. Another fan of the Purple Cow. So diving, we'll add 8 Mile in the show notes for those who haven't had the chance to enjoy that. So online reputation as well, part of the video user generated content is great. But you're controlling that, which is nice, but you're making it as real as possible. But we know what's real are those online reviews, and they can be great and they can sting, and sometimes they're not always fair. Sometimes you deserved it. So how do you go about evaluating your online reputation and taking action to improve it? How do you manage that?
Sure. There's two major chunks of that, and one of them is those review sites. We can get to the review sites. But to start with, I do a little bit of what's called either social or web crawler listening, where we listen to what's going on online. I use a couple of tools besides our social channels, which we, of course, monitor, respond, analyze, and provide solutions to any issues there. We use Google Alerts, and we use Mention, so that it crawls the web all night, and anything that is said about Brady Trucking overnight is emailed to me first thing in the morning, and I'm able to see what the world thinks of Brady Trucking this morning. So those are really important tools to listen to what's going on socially and on the web, wherever, and I get all those social mentions so I can respond to those. Secondarily is the review site. Glassdoor, for instance, is one, but Indeed has a review site, as does Facebook. And you're right, oftentimes it's a driver who left the company maybe on some bad terms that ends up writing the review. And you see that for restaurants sometimes when you go to someone who wrote the really bad review because they had the really bad experience. That, of course, happens. My first advice on all of that is to respond to everyone. You've got to consistently respond to every review with empathy. You don't have to agree with them, but you do have to empathize with them. And I have found anecdotal evidence that people read that stuff and take it for what it's worth. Sometimes it's sour grapes, and they know that. A mature driver is going to read that thing and know that, hey, that guy had a problem. Most of these reviews are this, and that review is that. And then the second part of this whole thing is to get more reviews. You get these bad ones from a guy who left for whatever reason. Who's going to give a good review? It's the people doing the work. It's the engaged people doing the work today. So we got to ask. And oftentimes, right at the end of orientation, a guy's really hyped up for a job. So I ask the people coming out of orientation for a review. Sometimes they don't have a great perspective on the company, but asking for more reviews certainly helps the entire process.
I totally agree. And I would suggest, when someone thinks like, how do I control this? When I first started, Jason, I thought, I was like, I need to incentivize them with some subway cards or gas cards or something. You just need to ask. And then I don't know if you've seen this. So, most people have a referral bonus program because, let's be real, we much rather would pay our drivers than we would Indeed.
Amen.
Have you seen, at least I saw this, I don't know if you've seen as well. Some of them weren't incentivized by the referral bonus program somewhere, right? That's always the challenge to get everyone involved. But I noticed the ones that were active would come to our defense on Facebook or Indeed and say, hey, rest of the world, this guy's just sour grapes. That's not how it really is over here. Call me if you want to know what's really like going on at our company. Here's my number. Have you seen any of that, or what any suggestions to incentivize your user community, right? To borrow a software term, about your driver community to engage you kind of on your defense?
So we don't have a formalized method, but we do have an army of defense soldiers who are on social media, who are on our platforms, who are telling the truth. Sometimes it's not beautiful truth about the company, but they're not going to let some guy who doesn't work here yet go off and say something that's not true. So my guys are course correctors. We have a mature workforce. We have, old-time drivers pretty much. We're not hiring the entry-level guys. But so these guys have a good perspective on the business, and they're not going to let someone mess up their organization. It's their organization, so they want to make sure the truth is out there. So yeah, I got a lot of protectors on Facebook. I even, sometimes when a guy makes a comment, I'll comment as the company and just tag a driver so that the driver draws attention to it and responds appropriately. And I have some ambassadors who will do that any day for me.
So I think that right there, this is the secret there's no silver bullet out there for the folks who are listening. Jason, what you've done clearly to have those group of ambassadors is just over time, you brought in the right people, you treat them right, you told them how it was going to be, and then you did it. And over that time, the secret sauce is build trust and respect over a long period of time, and then you'll have an army of ambassadors. So for the people listening, hopefully you've been doing things the right way for a period of time. And as Jason said, we'll do that, and then just simply asking, your ambassadors are out there. It's not that big of a deal to ask, and they'll come help. Just because we're coming against the time here, Jason, you mentioned you had a help on the video production side. You're a smart man, so you're able to be a one-man army because you outsource when it makes sense, and you do it yourself when it makes sense. But there's only so many hours in the day. How do you have a process of how you determine what you're going to do and what you're going to outsource?
I don't outsource hardly much. We'll assume we're having a team here, and I'm a player on that team. I'm a pitcher or a quarterback or something. I know that I'm not a designer. So if I need something designed, I got to get someone whose expertise is in that end of things. I shouldn't try designing things. I shouldn't try editing video myself. I shouldn't try a lot of these things that are highly specialized. Those type of things, of course, I get an expert for. I want it to look professional, even if it's a DIY type video. I want it all to look, professional and as well done as possible. So the specialty stuff I do call out to others.
It makes sense. And I heard those examples you described of specialty. I've always said for our business that we're going to focus on our core competency and outsource everything else. And, a design is a project. It's a start and an end, and you don't need that person on full time. Right. And that makes sense.
Right.
So, before wrapping up here with my question of reflection, Jason, is there anything else that you want to dive into today with the time we have?
You were talking about the gold, silver bullet, and what causes success and everything. And I think it's almost like a social faux pas to say the word love at work. But that is how I feel. And there's a couple of us saying it at this point. You got to love your people. I love my people. I love people. And I'm not scared to say that in business. I love the people. And I really do think that's reflected from our ownership and our management group down to our drivers and back. So it's about love.
All you need is love. I like it. It's genuine. And it's what comes through, Jason. I think it's why I've respected when I talk to you and what I read that you produce is it's all genuine and it comes from a place of sincerity. You really care about your craft. And I think that's why you've gotten ambassadors. I think that's what a great symbolism to show a success that you got people following that understand that love is genuine and real. So my hat's off to you. I can see it's coming through loud and clear to the team. And so maybe this answers this question, but this is the question I ask everyone that comes on the show, Jason, is what a career accomplishment are you most proud of and why?
So I think that the crowning glory of a corporate recruiter is when one of my recruits gets the promotion. Someone maybe from a front line to a manager or to an executive level or something. I had this job 23 years ago at Generac Power Systems. I started there. Today, I have a long view because I still have 60 friends on LinkedIn that work for this organization, 11 of which I recruited and helped hire. And like Generac in all my jobs, I take pride in having seeing one of my recruits self-actualize and flourish and succeed for them and for the company. So that's my success.
I totally agree. And I'll add on to that just from Karen Murphy, who's getting 2 shout outs today, that I knew that was why when I asked her, what do you love about the job? And that was just, it was helping someone find their home and find a job that they love. And to your point, flourish and move on to the next position. And that means that you really did your job. You found the right person. And think about the gift that you gave them. You gave them a job they love to come to. You gave them financial freedom. When you have those two things, a lot of other stuff falls into place nicely. So, Jason, thanks so much for the time today. Really appreciate nerding out with you on this. I'm confident there might be a part 2 because we just scratched the surface today. So hopefully we'll talk soon.
Great. That sounds excellent. Love talking to you.
All right. Well, for everyone, we'll catch you on the next episode. This was Jason Kent Crowell from Brady Trucking talking about the recruiting evolution. We'll include some details to the articles today in some of the show notes and a site. You can see some on those articles, some of the videos that he's created, some of the concepts we talked about of the new recruiting funnel, and some of what he's doing on attracting the passive candidate. So a lot of great stuff from someone who's in the field doing it every day. And we will catch you on the next episode. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for listening to Solving Your Driver Problem with Scott Bray. Check out avatarfleet.com/resources for more industry-leading materials on how to make the driver problem your competition's problem. That's avatarfleet.com/resources.